Today, I'm sitting down with Jacob Johnson, who is the founder and CEO of Glitch Energy. And today we're going to be talking about how to scale an e-commerce brand from the owner himself, why they partnered with a creator to help with the scale of their brand, as well as the operational side and operational bottlenecks that e-commerce brands experience. You don't want to miss this one. I'm Nikita from aspectagency.com, and let's get into the podcast. Jacob, so nice to finally have you on. I remember meeting you at Geek Out a few weeks back, and it was a pleasure talking to you. And I figured, you grew Glitch to such a huge brand that I think hearing from someone who runs an e-commerce store themselves would be really great insight for all the other listeners and watchers of the podcast.
Dude, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, it was great meeting you, Geek Out, and happy to provide as much value as I can during this time. So, like I said at Geek Out, I'm just kind of winging it, but we've found a few things that work, and um, I think in e-commerce and business in general, you focus on the 20% of the work that gets you 80% of the results, and I've kind of walked into those like blindly in some circumstances, and then also like a lot of failures previous to this that have resulted in some of that work as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's the only way to do it is to fail forwards. So,
agreed.
but yeah, for everyone that's not familiar with Glitch, can you give us like a quick breakdown of what you do and what the store is?
Yeah, so Glitch, it's a powdered energy drink brand in the gaming community. We're one of my business partners, Tyler. He goes by Wildcat on YouTube. He's got 8.5 million subscribers there, and so our kind of thesis when launching it was um, make a really good product and brand that people want to buy, and then partner with a big creator and really leverage organic growth early on to in lieu of other marketing channels such as paid media to acquire customers for cheap and really see if we can scale it from there. So like in a nutshell, that's what we did or what we tried to do.
Yeah. And the talk you gave at Geek Out was very interesting to me personally because I've never seen an ecom brand partner up with an influencer or a content creator to directly drive revenue through email and SMS. So, how did you come across that partnership?
Yeah, so our other partner in Glitch, my partner Zach and I played college basketball together, so we were really good friends. And then Zach actually grew up with Tyler, who's the YouTuber, and how that all came about. I was very entrepreneurial in college. Ran a few businesses previous to this, all failed, but learned a ton through them. And I think that's really what helped kind of propel Glitch early on. But always knew if there was a product that we could launch and get Tyler's name behind it and really drive authenticity behind it and make a product that he loved and he wanted his audience to enjoy as well. We knew that we could probably scale that pretty fast and at least have a little bit of traction when we launched. And so that was the pitch, and called up Zach. I was like, hey, I have this idea. I was big into health and fitness at the time, being a college athlete and really interested in the supplement space in general. And knew there weren't very many competitors in the energy powder space, in the gaming space. And that's where Tyler kind of lived and breathed from a content standpoint. And so pitched Zach on it, and then really pitched Zach on setting up a meeting with Tyler. And that's kind of how it all got started. And then, fast forward a few years, things take a lot longer than what you normally think they will. Um, Ended up launching full scale early 2021. February of last year is when we kind of launched our brand, like new branding. We did a soft launch previous that year, but it was really like it's kind of a hobby at that point still. Like I was still working full time, Zach was still working full time. Like we really weren't at a spot to go full time, and then raise some money, launched in 2021, and really kind of took off from there.
Yeah, that's
So
amazing.
I think I didn't answer your question on the email SMS side. Like our thesis early on was, okay, Tyler has an immense amount of eyeballs that we could tap into from an audience standpoint. Um, we wanted to figure out a way to make his promo as efficient as possible. So instead of really like we learned this previous when we did our soft launch of product in 2019. We really didn't do anything other than just like tell him to promote it, and it went pretty well. Like we sold out of a minimum order that we put in, and like we had some real traction, but um it wasn't really like there wasn't really much back into it. So our thesis going into like our full scale launch, when we rebranded and reformulated and really launched fully in 2021 was how do we convert as much of Tyler's audience as possible into email and SMS channels for us. And that was really the goal outside of driving revenue from him, was like, how do we capture that audience to where we can market to them whenever we want and communicate to them, not even just market and sell to them. Like, we really drive community as well through email and SMS. We make it very personal and conversational. We leverage Tyler a lot and his brand within that, as you were able to hear at Geek Out. But yeah, that was like the goal early on, was how do we convert as many people to our email and SMS list as possible.
Yeah, you're not kidding when you say really personal. You had some ugly selfies on there, which were hilarious. That seem almost too genuine to be true. Where if I were to get a text from, I don't know, let's say, I can't think of an influencer right now, but let's say Bradley Martin
Sure.
from Zoo Culture, and he'd send me like a goofy selfie, I'd be like, no shot, this is actually him. But it looks so genuine that it's like a friend actually sending you something, and it's like, hey, we're doing a promo right now. Um, and then you have the call to action that with the actual link to the sale.
Totally. Yeah, and I can talk more on that too. Like, when we first got started, as we were rolling out, like, we didn't get started with, excuse me, with SMS until late July of last year. It was, we should have done it from the start, but I was not, like, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So like, I just
Yeah.
didn't know any better. Like, oh, we need to be capturing phone numbers as well. But early on, it was like a lot of it was working with Tyler. He has a lot of trust in us from an operation standpoint now, to where like there's really not much like, hey, I need approval on this or that. But early on, it was like, okay, we would work with him to formulate a text. Like, he was cool with it. He would approve it. It would be from his brand presence, from him personally. We would personalize it with first name tags. And ultimately, like, we were responding, and even Tyler like was actually responding to some of those texts early on. Like, I would send him a funny response, and he'd be like, hey, respond with this. Or we would be at, meeting with him and going through some of that stuff. And like, there was a little bit of ad hoc, like, okay, actually respond to SMS and get people involved, like knowing that there's actually a person behind the text, and it's not just like a marketing blast from a company.
Yeah.
We kind of set the tone with that early on, and it really like propelled us, I think. And we were able to get really creative with some of these. Like, I just have Tyler, I have him send me like goofy selfies as if like he's holding a phone, taking a selfie, sending a text. Like, we wanted to make it as seamless as possible. And some brands can do that, some can't. Like, I think you have to kind of set the tone early on when somebody first opts into SMS on like what they might expect from you as a brand. But I think if you can overcome that barrier and figure out ways to drive community through email and SMS, not just like sales blasts, essentially, like you can do. And we have a lot of call to actions in our SMS. Don't get me wrong. Like, a lot of our texts are very much sales driven, but we do it in a way that's like conversational and like personalized.
Yeah, that's the thing I loved about it is even though it was a sales text, it still was personalized enough to the point where like even if I wasn't going to buy it, like I'm not going to unsubscribe or I'm not going to hit stop in all caps because like
Yep.
I think it's just so well written and almost appreciated. Even from like a marketing standpoint on my end, like I appreciate good marketing from other brands. So like I'll stay on just to like keep an eye out. But
Yeah.
if it's
Same here.
bad, I just like unsubscribe. I'm like, man, this is awful. Take my headphones off.
Yeah, I think like thinking like 30,000 foot view is like a lot of our audience is coming from Tyler. He's a
Yeah.
creator, he's an entertainer, right? Like, that's what he does on YouTube. Now, like, he's good at video games, but he doesn't play video games on YouTube to like be the best in the space. Like, he does it to entertain. Like, he has funny videos. And so it's almost an extension of him whenever we send an SMS or email blast. It's like, okay, this has to be entertaining. It has to be like witty and funny. And like, our unsubscribe rates have been super low on SMS because of that, I think. And ultimately, one other thing that we do is like, it's kind of a slight, I almost use like the first line of the SMS as a subject line hook as an email, almost like maybe like preview text on an email, right?
Yeah.
Um, because a lot of times with notifications on SMS, you can only get like the first line of the text that will actually show through from a preview standpoint on your phone. And so like, I'll make that really clickbaity. A lot of times it's personalized. A lot of times it'll, like, if we're doing a text on behalf of Tyler, it'll be like, hey, first name, it's Wildcat, like, open this text. Or like, I have a surprise in here for you, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Just to get people to actually open the text.
It's you're with Via on SMS, and I think they did like voice messages at one point, right? That you can send out voice messages. It sucks you
Yes.
can't do that anymore because there's like this is completely off topic, but it does pertain to SMS. Is when if you want someone to open your text, I read this the other day. You do things. You mark your like you make that preview text as call to actionable as possible, and the best way to do that is if you see someone sent you a voice message, and then you're like, oh, what'd they send me? And then like I had this happen to
Right.
me. A buddy from like years ago hit me up. He sent me a paragraph and then he sent me like a 1 second like voice message that's blank. And I immediately opened it. I'm like, I haven't heard this name in a while. He sent me a voice message. What's going on? And it was like, hey man, do you do Facebook ads? I need help with. I'm like, oh, come on now.
Dude, I wish they would bring that back actually. We never like we never got to test it. I wanted so bad to test that with Tyler now, like now in hindsight, just because I didn't really even like think about it as a feature. Like it was kind of something that was a second thought for me. But his actual voice in a text would be insane,
Yeah,
especially to that audience. But I've seen I think it was Eddie Malouf talked about this about like when you're sending text, like you could even use on iMessage like the hide like the invisible ink
yeah.
thing, and then like just a one word or one sentence like curiosity text, and then like invisible ink. And I've actually used that on some. I'm involved in a few different other brands where it's more like we work with creators on the financial management side and one of the other brands, and even texting different creators with invisible ink. Like I've actually seen it work pretty well. So
So you just text the word invisible ink, or you just text it and then you send it as invisible ink.
yeah, so like hey, wanted to follow up on this, or hey, wanted to send you something, and then the next text is whatever you send it all in invisible ink. So you like long hold the send button on iMessage and then
Yeah,
click send with invisible ink, and it comes through, and you have to like swipe your finger over it to read it. But like
yeah.
it's I don't know. Voice messages probably act very similar when you see that come through. And I personally don't like voice messages. I like reading something and being able to respond when I want, but it is definitely a good tactic because then you listen to it and you're like, well, now I have to respond because I'm going to forget what it says.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really interesting.
It's definitely a good play. And there's one thing that I also learned over that Geek Out weekend. It was more so, I think it was like during Jimmy's talk, they talked about for like CBD brands or hemp brands, instead of like sending them an SMS regarding that, you can just tell them like, hey, check your email for something. And I'm thinking now in your perspective, that might be a cool one to do with Tyler. Just be like, dude, you got to check your email right now. And then there's an
That's right.
email from him. So, like, number one, they open the SMS. Number two, they go to the email. They've already taken so many actions to get to the email. They have to see what's in the email, and that causes curiosity.
That's really interesting. I'm gonna have to test that because obviously SMS is a lot more expensive than email.
Of course.
So if you can save
Yeah.
credits and then push people to an email, that's why people use SMS because there's usually better results. If you
Yeah.
do it the right way, like you can still see massive results, but email is all about volume, I think, a lot of times, and you can send a lot of different campaigns without worrying like using up your SMS credits. So that's really interesting. I'm gonna have to steal that one.
More and more ideas thrown your way. But to transition over like back to Glitch on like the company side of things, like aside from it seems like you got the marketing thing nailed, right? Like you have a steady pool of audience. And I'm sure you're running ads right now as well, right?
We just
Here
turned
and
like
there.
all of our paid media off recently. We probably should turn Google back on. I just got tired of not seeing great returns on it compared to what we were doing elsewhere, and it was just like I don't know. We'll probably run some retargeting stuff during the holidays,
Yeah.
and through different launches, but yeah, we're not running anything paid right now, like
So
zero
just
dollars.
focusing on influencer, basically.
Just really like we have X amount of customers, which is a very small subset of what Tyler's audience is, and so we realize like there's still just a ton more opportunity to continue to tap into that audience, and so building out creative ways for him to promote it and get people to the site, get people to opt into SMS and email, so that then we can push them through our funnel. I don't know. For us, like we're not at a stage yet. Like, you know, my goal is to become an 8-figure brand at some point, and we're definitely not there yet, but at that trajectory, like when you get to that level, like obviously like paid channels are very, very important. Like you can't just like, you need really one channel to get from, I think Alex Hormozy says this about growth, where it's like 0 to 1 million, you really need one product and one channel. 1 to 10 million, you probably need multiple products and multiple channels. And then like 10 plus is like operational efficiency, a player team, multiple products, multiple channels, continue to push on all cylinders. So
Yeah,
that's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
that's a good way to think about it. The reason why I asked is with the marketing down, like, are there any other bottlenecks that you've experienced on behind the scenes on the brand side that I guess other e-commerce businesses or people that are listening would take like value from, not take making that same exact mistake?
Oh gosh, there's plenty of mistakes that I can talk about for sure. I would say like if marketing is like rocking and rolling for you, or like you're thinking about starting a brand, or you're in the process of starting one. For us, like a cheat code for us was a creator owned brand, right? Like we could leverage Tyler's organic audience and not spend money on customers early on. Like that exchange was for equity and partnership in the company versus like expending those dollars in cash with paid media. So that's how I thought about it early on. Like, let's assume marketing is not a bottleneck for a brand. The biggest mistakes that we made early on were on supply chain side. Like, bar none, like thinking about supply chain in the most efficient way that you can. A lot of people, when they hear that, they think like, well, just trying to get lower costs. Like for me, lower costs are not nearly as important now, versus like speed and time efficiency, and then like working capital terms. So as a brand owner, like, and I'm still learning through this process, but limited product drops are by far our biggest revenue driver. And in 2021, we were only able to do like 2 limited product drops. And so this year, like we've 3 or 4x that. But we want to get to where we're doing a limited product drop every month. And really the only way that you can do that effectively is like going and negotiating terms with your suppliers. So for us, we work with suppliers, like we work with contract manufacturers in the States, where I know it's a little bit different working with suppliers like in China, where it's a little bit harder to establish terms with us here. And the growth that we experienced early on, and then leveraging Tyler and his brand, like we're able to have some level of negotiation power. And I've negotiated terms, like, and I did this way too late, but like we were able to negotiate terms in lieu of like, let's say 5% cost savings. Like for me, it's more important for us to have a negative working capital, cash conversion cycle than having a little bit more savings on product early on, because we were growing. And like that was a big bottleneck for us. Like we just weren't able to launch more limited products. Like we had these lulls of where like we had some standard inventory in stock, but a lot of our customer data is like customers are buying drop to drop. And so for us, like every month that we don't do a drop is like a missed opportunity cost. So really like firming up supply chain, your product roadmap, like especially when you're working, like if you're a creator owned brand, like you can pretty much get anyone to buy something once. Like if that creator believes in the product and they convey that to their audience, and they have a big enough, especially in the gaming space where it's like a cult like following with a lot of creators. And so you can usually get anybody to buy something once, but then like thinking about repeat purchase rate, and then how that plays into your supply chain, how that plays into new drops, how that plays into like efficiency around terms. That was just stuff that I was clueless about when I got into this. Like I did not come from e-commerce. Like I've learned a lot in the last 2 years, 3 years, but ultimately like we would be at a very different spot if I would have learned that lesson earlier, of like really focusing on supply chain efficiency, and not only efficiency there around getting product, but like forecasting too. Because probably the best case scenario that you can be in early stage as a brand is like having too much demand. Like that's a good place to be. But if you can do that the right way, like maybe you're out of stock, like you don't want to be out of stock for months on end, right? But like if you're out of stock for a week, yeah, there's opportunity cost there if you're running paid media. But if you're a creator owned brand, like there's really not that much opportunity cost of not being able to sell product for a few days, for a week, for 2 weeks. I'd rather like have product super lean and not have like inventory tied up in cash. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's a mistake we made early on, is like we ordered too much, like we didn't order enough inventory, then we ordered too much inventory, and then we didn't order enough, and it was hard to forecast. And then at the same token, like 2021 was the worst year for supply chain ever. and our lead times kept getting pushed out. Thankfully, we were able to establish terms with suppliers to where we didn't have to float that cash. But that's probably the hardest part of scaling, in my opinion. Once you have a good product and you have like good value props and you can scale your product on the marketing side, like you're gonna run into so many bottlenecks on the supply chain side if you're not careful. So it's like measure 3 times and cut once type of deal. Like get super efficient with supply chain to scale. Like that's, I don't know. That's, if I could go back and do it all over again, like it would be very different.
Yeah, I can only imagine how, let's say you have like 100 grand in cash just sitting in inventory, waiting, and then you also have to wait another month for that inventory to come in so that way you can even promote it. Yeah, that must be stressful.
Yeah. And we had really good financing partners. Like we're not venture funded. So we were able to really leverage alternative financing solutions too. One being 8fig. It's 8fig.co. And like, I'm not getting paid to say this, obviously, but they were able to finance a lot of our inventory for us and really help alleviate cash flow crunches as we were scaling, which is like, it's super helpful. And now you're paying a premium on financing for that. But for us, it was more important to have efficient supply chain early on, because you can always go get economies of scale as you grow. Like when you grow to millions of dollars a year, 8 figures a year, there's ways to outlay cash and plan for cash flow that like you cannot, it's almost hard to see early on as a founder, because it's hard to see around the corner. You can go and get really, like you can get a lot of cost savings on supply chain after you've made it efficient, because suppliers, like they want to work with you. They want to grow with brands long term. Like it's not like it's a lot less about being transactional on one order. It's a lot more about like relationship building long term. And then like that's when you can go and say, hey, if we outlay, instead of having terms on these orders through the first 2 quarters of the year, like if we outlay X amount of cash and commit to this amount of units, can we get 20% cost savings on our COGS? And like that's when you can start to negotiate a lot more economies of scale as you grow. But you don't really have that luxury early on as a brand. Like you just need to have efficient supply chain and make sure that you're collecting as much cash before you're paying cash to suppliers. Like that's really the goal. It's like, how do you get a negative cash conversion cycle? Because then you don't need to
Yeah.
raise money. Like you can scale as fast as you want.
Yeah, that's one of those. It's a weird, I don't want to say infinite money glitch, but it's
Kind
almost
of
like
is,
that.
yeah. Like you're getting free money. Like you're getting, now maybe it's not free because you're paying a little bit more in costs on your cost per unit, but like
Yeah.
essentially you're getting money loaned to you from the supplier and paying it 30 days after they ship it to you.
Oh, it's a net
So
30 agreement then.
yeah, we have net 30 with a lot of our suppliers now. We're working on some still. Like there's like our main suppliers, and there's like subcomponents of like plastics and other components that maybe we have to procure versus like our contract manufacturer has to procure. So there's a lot of like moving parts there where we're trying to get more efficient with. But in a perfect world, you're working with your supplier and you have net 30 terms or more. Like some suppliers will do like net 60 nowadays. Like it's a little bit tough with the interest rate and financing environment we're in, but I've seen net 60 before. And like if you're doing limited product drops or finding a way to increase demand in a way that you're not paying for, like if you can collect all the cash for orders up front and then pay your marketing, pay your supply chain cost and everything else after the fact, and you have a multiple on that spend, like however you're doing your marketing, right? Like you
Yeah.
can essentially scale. Alex Hormozy talks a lot about this. I think he spent like, I watch a lot of his content, and he spent his
Same.
like lifetime return is like 30 to 1 on ad spend or like
Yeah.
marketing spend, which is nuts. I mean, he basically builds all of his businesses and all of his advisory around other businesses around like, how do you have like your 30-day cash window? How do you make that negative? Like, how do you collect cash before you pay it? And if you can do that at a multiple, you can grow without financing, right? Essentially. So
Yeah. It's I think he talked about it's like no one has financing. That's bullshit. You all have credit cards. As long as you can get the lead, close the lead within the net 30-day window for you to pay off your credit card and then pay off the credit card for your ads, then you can infinitely scale at that point. And then operations your biggest bottleneck, like you mentioned.
totally. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of like, don't go solve problems that don't exist yet either. So like just solve the first problem and then solve the second one after you've solved the first one. Like I
Yeah.
think a lot of founders can have like they can get really distracted and unfocused because of it. And for us, it was like, okay, problem that we needed to solve, and we're still solving it, but like was supply chain efficiency. It wasn't demand. Like we knew that Tyler was driving a ton of traffic and revenue for us early on, and we just knew that we needed to get supply chain efficient to match that demand. I don't know. It's different for every business, of course, but yeah, if there's a lot of creative ways to get to, there's a lot of ways that you can get creative with financing too. It's just about being resourceful.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always out there, like especially during recession times. I mean, it may be hard to get loans, but still, there's always creative ways to get that cash you need, especially with, I mean, you already have like history and you have proof of a successful business. You just need cash for fulfilling orders, etc., or manufacturing costs. So it's a lot harder to get financing when you're just starting up with an idea and like a
Yeah.
concept versus like if you've been in the game for like a year, and especially in your case where you have like 7 figures in sales, like it's not really going to be a problem. And if you already have the marketing set up. So
Yeah, a lot of these alternative financing companies won't work with you until you have, sometimes it's 12 months of sales history, sometimes it's 3 months. Like I've
mm,
seen both. And so really like a lot of the risk is right when you start. So like figuring out, and there's ways to formulate your offer, whether you're selling a product or maybe it's high ticket ecom, maybe it's digital coaching, like maybe it's agency services, like it's all in your offer, right? And like how you structure it. Like you can collect cash up front in a certain, like business has no rules, right? Like there's really no like rules on how you should do one thing or another. Like what's like there's best practices and there's things that work, but like that's where you can get really creative and like in your offer in general. Like if you're selling a product, like you can do a pre-order, like a lot of brands launch on a Kickstarter, or what we did was instead of like raising a bunch of capital to spend money on paid media, like we just worked with Tyler and got him involved as an actual owner and partner in the brand and a majority owner. And that doesn't always work all the time. Like you have to be, there's ways to evaluate like how creator own brand opportunities, but you just like it's usually not a matter of lack of resources. It's more of like lack of resourcefulness from what I've learned.
yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where even with partnering up with Tyler, like you'd probably be paying up your at up even with high CPMs right now and high CPAs that you'd be paying a lot
Oh
for
yeah.
like just acquisition cost, especially in such a competitive industry that it's a no-brainer for you to partner up with someone like Tyler to like even I don't know what his percentages are obviously, but like depending on what that is, like it's still more viable on your end to do that.
Totally. And like you can look at it objective. Obviously, like he brings a lot of value long term from like a brand awareness, reputation standpoint. There's a lot of ways that we can leverage him long term, even after, the biggest challenge that we're facing is like, okay, if we want to grow to X level, how do we grow in a way that where we are relying less and less on Tyler? And like that's a major problem that creator owned brands face. And so, we have one of the ways we are solving that is like our branding in general, like we called it Glitch for multiple different reasons. But in that circumstance, it was like, well, if we wanted it to just be Tyler's brand, like we would have called it Wildcat Energy or something. And it would have been a very different approach. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, just from a customer acquisition cost, like compared to paid media, like, I mean, our customer acquisition cost of Tyler is virtually zero. There's really nothing there other than the cost of equity. And for us, like, it's hard to put a price tag on that in the short term and the long term, but we knew it was valuable. And so equity in general, I think when you're launching a brand, if you're listening to this, everybody has to be incentivized properly. And I don't think like it's really tough to like split equity in a way that's like super objective early on. It's more so like everybody has to be aligned as far as they're going to work like crazy to make this happen. And then two is like everybody has to be equally incentivized. And so for us, like when we split up ownership with Glitch, it was like pretty equal as far as like our three owners. And ultimately, like you can't, depending on the stage of business you're in, you can't really you can do that or you can't do that, but getting the right creator involved at the right level of incentive is like a cheat code for your brand, I think. And so I would challenge all brands to think about it in the same way of like, is there like a capstone creator that we already have a relationship with that would, instead of paying them for promotion, we could get them involved as an owner. Maybe they can bring capital to the table. Maybe they can structure it as a loan. And really get incentivized to help us take this brand to the next level. Like I think that's a really interesting thought process as you're launching a brand.
Yeah, especially with a big creator. I know content is the future. I mean, there's a reason why there's so many people doing content right now. including me,
Yeah.
including this podcast,
Yep.
because that is going to be the future. Like people buy from people. I always like believed in that. Like people aren't going to be buying from like the sales team at Aspect in like 5 years. People are going to be buying because they see my face or other people's like face brands. Like people know about Eddie Malouf and 4Media because of Eddie Malouf. Same thing with
Right.
Hormozy. You know, like people identify with those people and they're like, okay, they know how to do this. I'm gonna go ahead and reach out to them. And the same thing goes for brands. Like you have faces attached to your brand to a point where other people will trust you because of what you're selling. Like I trust Derek from More Plates, More Dates to like for his supplements because I know that he digs into the research and he knows all the different,
Oh yeah.
supplements that go into a tub. It all goes down to that. Well, it was a pleasure, Jacob. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention or bring up before we end this?
There's a lot more failures that I could talk about. Really, most of the successes just come from failing. Don't be afraid of failure. I think failure is a prerequisite to success. I think that if you haven't failed, whether it's a previous business or in your current business, like you're not pushing the boundaries of your growth hard enough. And as long as you don't make a catastrophic failure and continue to persevere and operate, like as long as your business doesn't go bankrupt, like that failure can really propel you to success long term. We've tested a bunch of different stuff with Glitch. A lot of them have failed early on, but the ones that didn't, like the failures just led to more learnings and success later on. And like it's kind of a flywheel effect. So if I could say one thing to the audience, like whether it's agency owners or brand owners or anybody in particular watching this, it's like as an entrepreneur, like failure is your friend. It's not your foe. Everything that we've been able to accomplish with Glitch has been because of past failures, whether starting Glitch or even past business failures that I experienced through other business ventures that I've tried to launch and failed at. All of that has like compounded into a flywheel effect in business. And so the most successful people that I've seen are usually the most humble about their failures and the ones that learn the best from them. And it's like they have the right perspective on risk and failure.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good note to end on. Thank you, Jacob. Where can people find you?
I don't put out much personal brand content, but my Instagram, Twitter handles at Jacoby Ginobili, like Manu Ginobili, tribute to the lefty basketball NBA player. But on Twitter, Instagram, and I need to work on personal brand at some point, like you said, because attention, like content and attention is where everything is going. But
Yeah,
I've yet to do so, but hopefully soon.
absolutely, man. Well, it's been a pleasure, and I'll talk to you in the next one.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure, Nikita.
Thanks again for joining us on the Scaling E-commerce podcast. If you enjoyed it or learned something new, remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps out with the algorithm. If you want email marketing tips delivered straight to your inbox on a weekly basis from yours truly, then check out the link below or in the show notes to subscribe and join my newsletter. If you're a D2C brand with at least 10,000 email subscribers and interested in starting a conversation to work together, then go to aspectagency.com and we'd love to chat with you. And if you want to stay up to date with anything email and SMS, just follow me on Twitter at Nikita Vakrushev or check the show notes for the link. With that said, I'm Nikita and I'll see you in the next one.